FNR, Football Nation Radio.
We are more than engineers. We are more than project managers. We are more than surveyors. We are more than infrastructure specialists. We are more than planners. So, who are we? We are problem solvers, providing the highest quality service and results. We are a team of skilled professionals, focused on customer needs and outcomes. We are 23 years of industry experience, adhering to the highest safety standards. We are Melbourne, and we are right across Victoria. We are the Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions. Lanco Group. We are more than you realise, and we are ready to partner with you.
Sometimes I feel, I don't know.
Buona giornata, buona serata, buona giornata.
There's not really time to relax and take an espresso for Juventus.
You thought I forgot about you, didn't you? You thought I forgot about you, didn't you? Attaccare! Attaccare!
We are back. Euro Show, Monday evening, FNR, Football Nation Radio. Nick Dabano, Josh Parrish, welcome here today. Plenty happening in the world of football, plenty happening in clubland, bigger issues happening in the international football sort of scheme of things right now. And we're going to go through all of it here on the show today. Obviously, a lot's been happening, as we did mention, with obviously what's happening on the field, but off it as well. Before we get to that, though, Josh, we took a week off last week. We had a chance to put our feet up on a Monday evening. We're back here today to kick off. Well, not to kick off autumn just yet. We're in the final day of summer. It's been a long summer, to say the least. But we're coming towards you could say at least the business end of the European football calendar at the moment. We had Champions League over the last couple of weeks. Things are heating up right now.
Certainly are. And, I mean, Serie A continues to be our main focus because it is the league with the most twists and turns and narrative arcs.
Yes.
But, you know, there are some other competitions that are still very much alive.
Yes,
La Liga's not done and dusted just yet. Sevilla kept it going by beating Real Betis in the Seville derby. So, you know, we've got plenty to talk about today and not just international politics.
No, but let's start there though, Josh, because obviously over the last week, the discourse not only in sport, but really everywhere has been obviously the situation evolving in Ukraine at the moment with Russia's invasion, which has really been just a harrowing week and a bit. It continues to evolve, and obviously as a result of all the sanctions happening and the outcry from around the world, sport gets brought into this. Obviously Russia play a massive part in sport, not only in football, but you think about in the Olympics and many other different sports around the world. And if we're going to bring it back to a football standpoint, Josh, in only about 3 weeks' time, Russia are in World Cup qualifiers, the final round of European qualifiers. And there's been a pushback from European nations saying they don't want to play the Russian national football team. Now, we know the Russian players obviously aren't involved in what's going on. They are sort of the team that represent the nation. You know, they're not obviously the ones pushing what is happening over there. But there has been a big outcry, and we saw Poland come out, the Czech Republic, and I think Sweden all saying we're just not going to play and we refuse. We'll boycott the games. And it was left in the hands of FIFA. I think that's all we need to say about it. It's been left in the hands of FIFA. We saw the IOC come out and condemn the actions. We saw all sorts of action taking place from Formula One, ATP. Every other organisation was getting involved. It was all left with FIFA. And this morning they came out and they said that, these games are still going to go ahead. They're not going to play under the actual name of Russia. It'll be under a similar sort of way that the Russians competed in at the Olympic Games. They'll compete, I believe, as the Football Union of Russia.
Yes, indeed. So it'll be the Football Union of Russia, or RFU, will play at neutral venues without crowds, and the Russian national anthem and flag have been banned. So it's symbolism that's been the
dropped,
focus.
yeah. But it's not a very heavy sanction at all. And as we mentioned, it's not the player's fault, but in the situations like this, you've got to take action. And FIFA really, really fumbled the bag here.
Yeah, I think, they're in a difficult position, obviously, because it is a win and you're in World Cup qualifier. So there's a lot on the line for these nations. And with Poland being the team saying that they will boycott the game, you dread the thought of Poland actually having to, forfeit and Russia being awarded the default 3-0 victory, or the Football Union of Russia, we should say, because they can't compete under their own name under this decision. But FIFA are in a pretty tough position here because it's hard to not be accused of hypocrisy, given that the World Cup, the last World Cup, only 4 years ago, was held in Russia. So, they were used as a political pawn by Vladimir Putin, and Gianni Infantino couldn't be more gushing in his praise of Putin at the time as a leader. There's a video that emerged from the French locker room after they won the World Cup, and Infantino, who seems to suck up to every politician and every person in power, couldn't be more at the beck and call of this guy. Doesn't really want anything to do with him. He's already extracted what he needed out of FIFA in terms of political capital at that tournament. And you think back to those infamous images of Infantino placating the two dictators at the opening game, with Saudi Arabia's leader on one side, King, and Putin on the other. And as goal after goal went in for the Russians, who were full of energy and full of beans, quite curiously, at that tournament, he was sort of shrugging his hands and trying to, placate these tyrannical leaders. And FIFA, are a morally corrupt organisation. We've known that for years and years. So this is not a surprise whatsoever. They haven't taken stronger action. The statement says, FIFA will continue its ongoing dialogue to determine any additional measures or sanctions, including a potential expulsion from competitions, that shall be applied in the near future should the situation not be improving rapidly. I'm not sure what news sources they're paying attention to, but it doesn't look like the situation is improving anytime soon.
Yep.
So, I just can't see a situation where they wouldn't be forced into stronger action by the pressure. So to come out with this limp statement that doesn't really do anything tangible to strip Russia of its prestige in international football, they could still end up with the World Cup at the end of the year. It does leave a sour taste, and if FIFA's policy on human rights means anything, I think they have to expel Russia from not only the World Cup qualifying, but from FIFA.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that this isn't just going to end after this World Cup qualification campaign. It's going to seep into the UEFA Nations League, into qualification for the Euros in 2024. It's going to keep going as long as there's tension in Eastern Europe at the moment. As mentioned, Russia...
And not only tension, but outright warfare and atrocities.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will get worse. There's no sugarcoating that.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of get your head around and confront it, but that's what's happening right now is an invasion. I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that.
Yeah,
even if Putin likes to call it a special military operation, we all know what that's code for. So I can't really come up with a defence for FIFA here, and I don't care to. What's been heartening in the world of football has been the response of not only some Ukrainian players, but also even some Russian athletes around the world who've come out with anti-war statements. There's been a lot of crowd support for the Ukrainian players, in particular at the Benfica game the other day, where as soon as Yaremchuk was substituted on, the crowd gave him a standing ovation and started waving flags and so forth. Very emotional scene.
Similar with Ruslan Malinovsky scoring on Friday as well. And
unveiling that shirt.
The shirt, yep. And obviously we know with West Ham as well, Andrei Yarmolenko's been, he's taken some, obviously indefinite leave from the club for obvious reasons. He's got family still in the Ukraine right now. But looking ahead, Josh, at the moment, the Russian Football Union will be playing Poland, at least it's scheduled at the moment, on the 24th of March. And the winner of that game will then host Sweden or the Czech Republic. And Ukraine, on the other hand, they actually have a World Cup qualifier of their own against Scotland, in Scotland as well. So that will also be a bit of an interesting scenario to see how this all plays out in the coming weeks. Because if FIFA do take action, look at this now from a logistics standpoint, because obviously with the draw and everything, they ranked everyone else based off where they finished in their group, second place finishes, and Russia had the fourth best second place finish. I don't know if it's as easy as going, all right, Russia sits out, and you put Slovakia and you finish third in the group. You'd almost have to then rework the entire standings and push everyone up, because Slovakia had less points than Sweden, Wales and Turkey. And also, I think as well, they had a worse goal difference than they had a worse goal difference than Poland. So they'd be the third worst ranked team. So it would push everyone up and you'd almost be forced into a redraw. So there's other logistics that have to be taken into account with this whole thing. So it's going to be a very interesting situation to see how FIFA handle this. I don't know how much say with this in terms of the draw and whether this will also affect UEFA, but I can imagine it will as well. It's also going to affect UEFA beyond the World Cup too. So there's a lot of things still to play out. A real watch this space. And I believe by the time we come back next Monday, I wouldn't be surprised if this situation has evolved further.
Yeah, I think the simplest thing to do for FIFA would be to expel the now Russian Football Union from the competition entirely and just progress Poland straight to the final against either Sweden or the Czech Republic. I think that is the most sensible route to take. And it doesn't guarantee Poland a place at the World Cup either. But the thought of having Russia competing at a World Cup while this has been going on at the end of the year, we're in Qatar, no less. It would just be such a clear indication of where the sport's moral compass is at the moment. And let's not forget, UEFA aren't immune from criticism either. When you look at, they've moved the Champions League final away from St. Petersburg, but they're still accepting 40 million euros a year in sponsorship from the Russian gas provider Gazprom. So it's these little symbolic actions have been taken, but when it actually hurts the bottom line, or where it actually puts this organisation in a position where they have to take a serious moral stand, you can see they shrink from it. It's spineless, and it honestly, it disgusts me.
Well, the other bit of action that has been taken has been Roman Abramovich has, I guess, stood down from day-to-day operations of Chelsea. He's still the owner of the club. He's passed it on to the Chelsea Trust. It's not, I think, like, as much as it is a big move, it really isn't. Like, when we look at this in another way, he's still in control of Chelsea. I don't think much has really changed in that sense, other than the fact that he just doesn't have the day-to-day operations control of the team, but he still pumps the money into the club.
It reminds me of that scene in The Simpsons where Mr. Burns explains that the head of the power plant is actually Canary M. Burns, and he can't be legally prosecuted. So that's basically what it is.
Literally.
Roman Abramovich, has a pretty shady past. It's the way his wealth was gathered. I don't think we need to go into a history lesson here. But he's also stepped away from the club for a long time in terms of managing the day-to-day operations. Yes, he's still ostensibly the man in charge, but I don't think it's a big deal considering that that Petr Cech was managing a lot of the stuff at the club already and making most of the football decisions. So I don't see it as particularly game-changing for Chelsea. The question is whether Abramovich will continue to be able to plough money into the team, because you saw with Chelsea's transfer spend over the last few years, they've been insulated against the pandemic because Abramovich was able to just spend and spend and spend. And they were also able to recoup a lot of money through player transfers and this massive loan network that they have as well. So they were able to get around, some of the financial fair play obstacles that way. So I don't think it'll make a huge difference to them unless the supply line is cut off as a result of this, and I'm not sure that's clear. And I'm not sure that Chelsea will really suffer at this point because football has certainly moved on from the pandemic, and it got them through that difficult period. But where the club is at financially now, I'm not sure if they need the owner backing anymore. I think they've already gone ahead of the curve with the transfers where no one else was spending. They went out and spent huge on Kai Havertz, for example.
Yeah. And also, spending 97.5 million on Romelu Lukaku as well, which has presented all sorts of problems since.
Well, I really meant the summer before.
When they went big. Well, that was after the transfer.
Timo Werner as well. You can argue that wasn't a particularly good use of that money, but
Lukaku was the only signing they made as well this summer. But you look back prior to that summer as well. You mentioned last season they had the transfer ban as well. That was the famous year where they brought in, I guess, all the youngsters. They got opportunities, guys like Reece James and Fikayo Tomori, Mason Mount, all those players as well, really got a lot of opportunities. But it is going to be a real watch this space, what happens in Russia over the next little bit, to see, I guess, what happens with FIFA and how this impacts as well with, the club competitions as well, about these teams performing and playing in some of in Europe's, domestic competitions, Champions League, Europa League, Conference League.
Well, you got the coach themselves. Tuchel even says that it will change nothing in the day-to-day running of the club, because the director, whose name I was searching for before, Marina Granovskaya, and Petr Cech are responsible for the decision-making.
It's just the finance stuff.
Abramovich, until this weekend, retained final sign-off on big decisions, including the future of the head coaches and player transfers. But I wouldn't necessarily think this is a bad thing for Abramovich to move further away from the decision-making, because he's meddling in the past when he first took over and he was very hands-on, sacking coaches left, right and centre and insisting on signing players like Shevchenko and Torres. Didn't leave Chelsea in a good position. So
absolutely.
I don't really think it penalises Chelsea. The only thing that will is if Abramovich ends up getting his assets seized in the UK, which is a live possibility. But considering he's, I think, technically a citizen of Portugal now, that might be difficult to legally accomplish.
Let's move on now, Josh. Let's go back on to start talking about some of the stuff on the field. We mentioned Chelsea. It's a perfect segue to talk about this morning's game in the Carabao Cup final. They fell to Liverpool 11-10 on penalties after a goalless draw. I think they went 120, or is it the famous 90 in penalties with the Carabao Cup? I always get confused because it seems like it's always changing over in England at the moment. But it was Liverpool who did come up trumps. They did actually go, yes. It was
the full extra time.
Yeah, they went the full extra time. One penalty missed, and it was by the name of Kepa Arrizabalaga, who obviously was unlucky not to score his penalty. He was subbed on for Eduard Mendy in the game as well. But Liverpool come up trumps. It's a game that really was a matter of inches, a few inches this way, a few inches that way, and Chelsea could have come up trumps. But Liverpool continue their good run. They're getting it done in the league right now. They've closed the gap on Manchester City at the moment. We saw the controversy with Manchester City on the weekend with the handball and everything like that, which went against Liverpool in the title race. But Liverpool get a new shiny bit of silverware to add to their cabinet this season, and that hopefully, in their sake, will be looking to add to that as the season progresses.
The only thing I could think as I watched this morning was that there must be a certain former Chelsea manager by the name of Maurizio Sarri sitting somewhere and throwing his head back and laughing.
I don't think he was throwing his head back and laughing too much after that, Josh, because his side lost in the 95th minute.
Perhaps the notification went off in his phone. Maybe prior, when he's got FOP mob notifications still on.
Had his cigarette break when they were warming up and everything. Yeah,
and he looked at his phone and just thought, vindication.
Yeah.
Vindication, because if you think back to when he tried to sub off Kepa in that famous, it was a Carabao Cup final.
It was.
And Kepa refused to be substituted.
Oh, in the words of a certain pundit here in Australian football, when you're told to come off, you come off.
I thought you were going Stephen A with it.
No. I was tell you a certain pundit from the Apple Isle, Josh.
Well, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. With him. Maurizio Sarri's Chelsea reign seemed to spiral into turmoil from there. That was the moment where it all went south for him. So, I think he was vindicated by this penalty shootout. Of course, a goalkeeper taking a penalty is always an extreme situation. But the Irish youngster Caoimhin Kelleher slotting
got the start as well. Yeah,
decisive penalty. And then the thing I liked from this game was there's actually crowd footage of the Liverpool fans celebrating, and you can just see on the left-hand side of the frame a stray ball just ends up in the crowd, and it's Kepa's penalty. That's because obviously, you know, it was so far off target. It ended up in row Z. And there was another photo that followed on an Instagram account, which was somebody's dad was at the game, managed to catch the ball and kept it as a souvenir.
Great. That's great.
So the last kick of the game, the kick that ultimately won Liverpool the Carabao Cup, and you've got a memento.
Has there been a goalkeeper with a worse run since signing for Chelsea than Kepa Arrizabalaga?
I'm the one wearing the Spain jersey.
Arrizabalaga. Well, let's just keep it simple. Kepa. Has there been a worse run? Because he got signed for over 71 million at the time, and it was an eye-watering fee. When you consider at that time, it's not like he was the best goalkeeper in Spain at that point, and Chelsea went nuts to get that deal done to replace Thibaut Courtois, and now he finds himself as the number 2. Everything that you can think of that could go wrong has gone wrong, and this is just another chapter in what has been a real sorry time in London for himself.
Well, it's interesting that Tuchel has pursued the 2 goalkeeper, 1 in the cup kind of policy at Chelsea. It's a very continental thing. It's not so common in the Premier League. I guess it's becoming more common with the amount of European managers that actually operate in the league. But, you know, having that hard and fast policy and sticking with them all the way to the cup final, I mean, it's something that I guess Liverpool have done as well. But
he brought Kepa on like Tim Krul spec from the 2014 World Cup for penalties. He brought him on the 120th minute. That is, we were talking about penalty shootouts the other week about where do you rank these, your best penalty takers. This is a risky one.
Because I think he played earlier in the Carabao Cup for Chelsea. And then Tuchel ended up starting Mendy in the final and then going back on it before the shootout, as you say, which is totally puzzling.
It was strange because every time I think, as we mentioned, you think back to that 2014 World Cup when Jasper Cillessen got subbed off and he brought Louis van Gaal brought Tim Krul on for the penalties, and Tim Krul ended up being the hero in that game against Costa Rica. But Kepa got brought on, and there's always the famous rule when it comes to making a sub before a penalty shootout, and we remember it from the Euro final. You don't make the subs too close to the penalty shootout and make them take a penalty, because we've seen how many times there's a player who has barely had a pass, had a shot, completely fluff their lines when it comes to taking a penalty. I think back to Simone Zaza against Germany, the famous stutter step.
That wasn't a stutter step. It was high knees.
It was like he was still warming up. You know, he was doing his warm up on the way to take the penalty. And you think back to, you know, at the Euros final, players like Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford both missing their chances as well. So I wonder if it's the same with goalkeepers, because he had 1 sub left, and instead of bringing on maybe a little bit earlier, he could have brought on Saul Niguez or Ruben Loftus-Cheek or Callum Hudson-Odoi. He decides to turn to Kepa. And that's such a bold move, because it's not like Eduard Mendy's a bad goalkeeper. This is arguably the best behind Alisson, probably the second best goalkeeper in the Prem.
Maybe he made a promise to Kepa that if it got to the shootout that he could try and redeem himself. Still though, like in this situation, it's a bit of silver on the line. Well, you never really expected Mendy to take one either. So, you know, he wasn't brought on to take a penalty. It just got that far. Yeah. It just happened to go 11 for 11 or 10 for 10, and then it got to the 11th player, I should say.
Well, I'd love to see what would have happened if Eduard Mendy took the penalty instead. Look, we don't know. I don't know if there's any footage out there, if anyone's got some footage of Eduard Mendy taking a penalty.
But he's not a bad goalkeeper from penalties in terms of saving them.
Saving them.
He's got a great reach. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't have thought there was any great advantage to subbing Kepa on, which is very strange. But, you know, it turned out neither goalkeeper was able to save one in the end. So Chelsea, they stayed in it. You know, I think Liverpool are a much better team than them, and it showed. It's interesting to see Lukaku on the out at the moment. You know, he came off the bench in this one, but they've continued to start Havertz as the false 9. I'm struggling to see where Lukaku fits back into their Chelsea team, given where, you know, the politics are at in that side. You know, Tuchel saying, it's the same system. You know, he just has to do more, essentially. And I wonder whether he's falling into the same trap as a manager as so many others have, thinking Lukaku is this big back-to-goal target man. whereas Havertz is much more suited to play that linking role with the balls to his feet. And I've always felt that some of Lukaku's best football has come either in a strike pairing or even on occasion when he's been played
out wide,
out of position, on the right-hand side. He loves to make that run out to the right and then cut in. And he can do it at speed. And he's a hard player to stop when he picks up speed.
And when he's running into space as well, running at defenders.
But managers think, I've signed this striker, it'd be stupid to play him as a winger. But it's secretly his best position. And I'm not sure if managers quite have figured that out, or even if Lukaku has figured that out. But that's what I observe from him. And that's why I think he's better in a strike pairing, because he's got more option to play facing goal, and he's got more option to drift out into spaces out wide where he can attack defenders in space.
All I'm saying is we saw him under Conte in the 3-5-2, Josh, as you mentioned, a strike partnership. We saw it for 2 seasons and it worked. And he was arguably probably behind Erling Haaland, the best number 9 in the world at that time. But
Tuchel's won a Champions League with this system. He's not changing it.
But it's like, so why did you sign him then? You know, because if you know he's not going to fit into your system, then why'd you sign him?
Was that the last captain's call from Abramovich before he...
Potentially. Who knows? Maybe it came from above him. I know, look, there's been a lot of criticism, I think, in some aspects fair with Lukaku's off-field behaviour, with taking interviews and literally saying that he wants to leave and wants to go back to Inter and never wanted to leave. And he's kind of burnt the Inter bridge as well, because he left when... You know, Inter would have probably thought he could have just turned his back and said, I'm not leaving. I would no matter what, as much as the fine situation.
Had to leave with their financials.
He did, but, you know, Inter fans don't see it that way.
No.
Because they probably think, well, he could have still turned down the, you know, really just played hardball and said, I'm not signing a contract to Chelsea, and said, stuff it. You could sell somebody else.
It's hard when the club leadership is telling you this is a good deal, you should go, you know.
But they could have easily sold Lautaro Martinez for that same money. And you've seen how Lautaro Martinez has performed this season. He has had a shocking season. And Barca at the time, we know Barca's had their financial problems. There was a time where Barca were offering some ridiculous cash for Lautaro Martinez, similar to that Romelu Lukaku money. You'd have to think that, I think if Inter had their time again, maybe they would have looked to have maybe sold Martinez, kept Lukaku. I know that's actually worked out okay for Inter this season. Dzeko, despite his age, he's had a pretty good season. Joaquin Correa has been a good signing for them. But for Chelsea, I just don't think this move is going to work unless they change system, or unless, as you said, Josh, they try and utilise him as a forward, like playing him behind as a winger. You know, taking up one of those positions. But realistically, is he going to displace Mason Mount? Is he going to displace Christian Pulisic from that starting 11? I just don't see it. I see that Tuchel wants those speedy, sort of smaller guys in behind. He wants to go a bit smaller. And Kai Havertz works as the false 9 for it. He won them a Champions League last year. So I just don't see it changing. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Lukaku in a Chelsea jersey next season, but it's a matter of who the hell is going to pay him. Because everyone's going after Mbappe. Everyone's going after Erling Haaland at the moment. He's kind of been forgotten as like the third option right now. And we know his volatility. Who's going to sign him in the Premier League? Who's genuinely needs him? Is he going to fit in a Guardiola system? Absolutely not. Because, you know, he's going to have to pass the ball. He's going to have to play as a false 9 unless you play him out wide. Is he going to fit in the Manchester United system? No, he won't fit in the Manchester United system. It seems like it's either, well, Tuchel makes it work somehow with him as a winger, or he might be trying to get shipped back to Italy, but the only team that can afford him is Juventus, and they've just signed Dusan Vlahovic. So, or, unless, big brain stuff here, there's a certain team that is managed by his former manager by the name of Tottenham Hotspur go, hey, look, you know what? We might sell Harry Kane. Ooh. We might get the cogs turning. We use the Harry Kane money to ship him off.
I don't think Kane's going anywhere.
I don't think Kane's leaving.
After the performance against City, you know,
unless he decides look,
he's still got a number of years to go on his contract. What is it? 2 or 3 more years after this season. So you know, he signed a 6-year contract. His brother is his agent, so he doesn't have a lot of negotiating power. And we've already seen that play out. You know, I'd be surprised to see it happen again. You know, and he's also not the kind of player who can really pull off the want-away superstar shtick, you know, because he's the captain and he's Harry Kane, he's England captain. His entire persona is built around him being like a solid stand-up
3
guy.
years left on his contract, by the way.
Yeah. So
no, sorry, 2
more
years left on his contract.
Still, he doesn't have until not this summer, not this northern summer, but next northern summer. He doesn't have a lot of leverage, so I'd be surprised to see him leave this coming off season. Yeah. And Lukaku doesn't have that many options. He's backed himself into a corner a little bit. Maybe he just have to try and outlast Tuchel in the role, which is going to be tough because I don't see a better manager suddenly emerging for Chelsea.
Let's take a short break here, Josh, and we come back. A little bit of Serie A, a bit of La Liga, a bit going on all around Europe. We'll go into all of that. And also, well, we're going to talk about a certain man that debuted last week and didn't play this morning. Well, he didn't debut last week. He scored last week. It took the Australian football diaspora by absolute storm. We're going to touch on that a little bit because I think that after this morning, maybe we've heard things have changed maybe just a little bit. It's been very quiet on the Bird app recently, Josh. It's very different to what it was 8 days ago. Very, very quiet from a few accounts. But anyways, we'll be back in just a little bit.
Are you looking to change your destiny in life? Be your own boss? Start your own business? If you are, you need people who understand your needs and are committed to helping you make it happen. At DKP & Co Chartered Accountants, we are more than just accountants. We are business advisors, taxation consultants, and strategists that specialise in setting up businesses. We understand the client and give them the very best customised advice and strategies to achieve their goals. Visit our website, dkpco.com.au, or give us a call today on 03 9023 9370. Fast, proactive, personal. That's DKP & Co Chartered Accountants.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Cambiasso. This is where Argentina can be very patient indeed. I've watched their youth teams do this. Just play the ball endlessly around the edge of their opponent's penalty area, then suddenly break with devastating consequences. Saviola, Cambiasso. Cambiasso! They've done it! They've done it! And scored a fantastic goal! How many passes did they put together there? You'd need a calculator.
FNR, Football Nation Radio.
Sometimes I feel, I don't know.
Buona giornata, buona serata, buona giornata.
There's not really time to relax and take an espresso for Juventus.
You don't have to get about it, did you? You don't have to get about it, did you? Attaccare!
Welcome back to the Euro Show here on FNR Football Nation Radio. Nick Dabano and Josh Parrish taking you right through to 7 p.m. Listening on the podcast, make sure you leave us a like, a review, subscribe to the FNR Football Nation Radio platform. Let us know what you'd like to hear on the podcast next Monday. We always love a bit of fan interaction. Even if you're listening in on the Twitch, drop us a comment as well. Josh, it's time to dive into the world's best league. No, Ante Jukic, this is not high NL hour. We're talking a bit of Calcio, Serie A football. And as always, it seems like the title race continues to throw up another spanner. But it literally does. It finds a new way to baffle every single week. And this weekend, again, it was insane. And it kicked off on Saturday morning. 4 a.m. left a lot of Milan fans around the world absolutely fuming, including myself. I woke up on Saturday morning and Josh, not going to lie, when I watched back the replay and I saw that handball, that blatant handball that was missed, I threw my phone like I did before the show, but this time it didn't actually land on a cabinet. Milan won, Udinese won, Rafael Leao opened the scoring, and then Destiny Udogie. Now, if you haven't seen the goal, a great ball into the area from Roberto Pereira. Shout out to Roberto Pereira. Fantastic cameo off the bench. Really changed the game. But the ball comes in front of him and he literally shovels the ball in with his hand.
Let's not gloss over the amazing overhead kick to centre the ball before that.
Look, it was a fantastic cross, but he shoveled the ball in with his hand, Josh. He punched it in.
I'm just watching the footage back and, I mean, there's a defender in front of him. It just sort of hits him. He tries to get his arm out of the way, but he does not succeed.
And it goes to VAR. They check it and just give him the all clear. So this is another game. Now, I don't want to sound like a salty Milan fan, but yes, I am going to sound like a salty Milan fan because this is now twice this season. Milan have had some real bad calls go against them in big games. We saw the Spezia game a few weeks ago when it was 1-1 and Junior Messia scores the goal, but they decided not to pay advantage for the foul. No, Messia scored the goal. Rebic was the one who bloody grabbed the ref's face afterwards. But there was the foul in the lead up. They didn't pay the advantage and Messias would have gone on won the game. They go back, take the free kick. They fluff it. Spezia go back up the other way, score, win the game. Milan up in this game. They drop another 2 points as a result of a bad performance from the referee. Now, Milan did not play well in this game. Let's not gloss over the fact that they were just not up for it. Udinese have constantly been Milan's Achilles heel for a very long time. That's the game that every Milan fan, it's circled on the calendar like, God help us, this is going to be a drab. And we're probably going to drop at least 2 points in this game. And sure as hell they did. They did earlier in the season as well. So it then opened the door for Inter later that day. They were playing straight afterwards in Genoa against Genoa, not Sampdoria. And despite having 20 shots on goal and absolutely peppering the Genoa goal, 0-0. Genoa held firm. They've been on a good run as of late under their new boss.
And don't you mean David Zrilic's Genoa?
Well, yeah, technically. I mean, as the assistant coach. But, you know, they had plenty of chances against Genoa. I've got to give credit to Genoa and especially to their new manager, Alex Blesin, who has really changed things over the past little bit since taking over from Andrei Shevchenko. But, my God.
21 shots, 4 on target. That's just poor.
Only an XG of 1.45, and from 7 shots, Genoa almost had half of that. So that goes to show Genoa were actually creating, arguably, for the volume of chances, almost better chances on goal. So Inter's poor attack continues after the last little bit. Despite having a game in hand, they remain 2 points behind Milan. Opens up the door for Napoli this morning against Lazio, and my God, this game had it all. Insigne opens the scoring. Pedro with an absolute belter to equalise. Like, if you haven't seen this goal, go back and check it.
It is incredible. Let's describe it for the audience.
So this was also Pedro's 100th career goal. So to talk about it, what a way to bring up your milestone
this is the ex-Barcelona winger Pedro of the famous 2011 team that won all before.
So already a fantastic save in the lead up for that one. But sorry, this is actually the
highlight beforehand. It was Pedro. He tested the goalkeeper before that. So
Luis Alberto puts the ball into the area. Great set piece. It's cleared away. Pedro's just waiting on the edge of the area.
Just on the top of the D.
Yeah.
And the ball is coming at him from such a height. Like, it's headed clear, and it doesn't actually drop for him that nicely. It's almost thigh height when he meets it, and he manages to get over the ball somehow.
Somehow maneuver it.
I mean, he's a small guy, Pedro. Yeah. He doesn't have height on his side, but he manages to just catch it perfectly on the flush on the volley off his left foot, his weaker left foot. And, I mean, it would have been one of the all-time great saves if David Ospina had been able to beat that around
he almost did.
The post. He got a good hand to it, but it was just too powerful and just hit the bottom of his wrist. And you know, just the speed of the ball, the volume, like the velocity of the hit was off the charts.
Yeah, and that was in the 88th minute. So Lazio thought they had salvaged a point, and I think all Milan and Inter fans breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that, okay,
everyone's dropped the same amount of points.
Like for the second straight week, everything's gone, you know, possibly wrong. But got to give it to Elmas. What a performance off the bench. He gets the ball in transition. He breaks forward. He has the space, plays it out wide. I believe that was Lorenzo Insigne that picked up the ball on the left-hand side.
So a goal and an assist for the Toronto FC bound.
Yes. So as you can see, Insigne gets on the left-hand side. He lays it off perfectly to Fabian Ruiz. Again, just trailing on the edge of the area. And this is what Fabian Ruiz does so well. If you haven't watched Fabian Ruiz play, I just get his highlights up. Just watch this man play football at the next possible opportunity. He scores goals like this all the time. Just trails, patiently. Ball falls to him perfectly. Hits it left foot from outside the box. Perfectly placed into the bottom left-hand corner.
He cuts across the ball in a really exaggerated motion. Like Fabian Ruiz is this elegant player. He's quite tall. He's got legs that seem to just go on forever. They're so spindly and long. But he's got such presence and such composure in everything that he does, even moving at high speed. Or high speed for him. He's not the speediest player. But trailing the break, as you say, he sort of emerges on the footage off screen. Like he just, Insigne lays the ball into space. And he just, you think he's passed it to no one. You think, what have you done, Lorenzo? And then suddenly Ruiz appears from off screen. And there are two players trying to block the pass. One defender flying with a slide in front of him with a leg almost waist height. Another one trying to block the angle. And he just curls it around both of them and perfectly into the bottom corner, just grazes the inside of the left-hand post on its way in. And immediately the shirt comes off. You know, the entire bench is run down. They're down at Sao Paulo. They've got this big athletics track around the pitch. So it's a long way to get to the fans. He's got a bandage on his head.
Yeah, at the Olympico.
At the Olympico, I should say.
Strakosha, the goalkeeper, was left with absolutely no chance as well. You don't hit those better. And usually, how many times we've seen when a player lines up a long-range effort like that and they get they keep their body up high and they just sky it. Like we see it all the time. We've seen it in Sunday League when the eyes light up with someone on a layoff. They're like, come on, lay it off. And they just smack it. Rosie kind of stuff, right? That's a particular skill to hit that on the run as well. You know, that and did it to that position as well.
Most players would try and put their foot through the ball.
Yeah, and would just try and go for power. But that was
sometimes if you hit it perfectly, you know, it's the most spectacular goal you've ever seen. But he controls it so beautifully. So I mean, it was just an amazing finish. Do you think Napoli deserved to win this game? It was a pretty tight one.
Pretty tight game. I mean, it was a game of moments, and if you took them, that was going to be the difference. And look, Napoli did. They have done this for quite some time, but right now they're timing their run really well. Just like Milan, they're out of Europe. They got bundled out of the Europa League by Barcelona on Friday. So their last 11 games, they go in with less distractions than say Inter do at the moment. And same with Juventus, who have actually brought the gap back to only 7 points.
They're unbeaten in the league since December.
Yeah. So Napoli is starting to get a bit of a head of steam, but there's a big game to come next week, which probably will decide. I wouldn't say will decide the title race, because every week when you think the title race is ebbing in one way, there's just another complete, baffling result that will go just unexpectedly wrong for any of the contenders. But Napoli hosts Milan next Monday morning in Naples. They met in January. Napoli won 1-0 in Milan. So right now they have the head-to-head over the Rossoneri, hence why, not even with the goal difference, but they've in the way Serie A works is it's head-to-head if you finish on points. So this is a big game, because if Napoli win or just get a draw in this game, they maintain the head-to-head if they end up level at the end of the season, which is a real possibility right now. But Napoli have got quite a handy run after that. You know, Hellas Verona, Udinese, but then it gets a bit harder when they play against Atalanta, Fiorentina and Roma. But if you compare their run home, their last 4 games compared to Milan's, it's perfect for Napoli. Sassuolo, Torino, Genoa, Spezia. While Milan, on the other hand, their last 4 games, Fiorentina, Hellas Verona, Atalanta, Sassuolo on the road to finish the season. They have 4 prickly games. Mind you, before that 4th game against Fiorentina, they play Lazio on the road. So Milan right now, they can't afford to slip up anymore. They need to beat Napoli on Monday morning. I implore anyone, if you're getting up early on Monday morning, 6:45, watch this game. It's going to be great. When they met at the in Naples last season, it was arguably the game of the season. 3-1 win for Milan. Can't wait for this game. So just make sure you're glued to your screens on Monday morning.
What gives you any confidence as a Milan fan after the performance against Udinese that you're going to pull off a result?
Milan have this
away at Sao Paulo.
Milan have this tendency to play to their opponents. So if they're playing a worse team, the opponents, this has been their problem for so long, is that when they play teams they should beat, they tend to drop their team that play to the opponents. So we've seen it against Salernitana and against Udinese.
Their best performances come against the best teams.
Against the better teams. And when they played Napoli last time again, they were the better team in that game, and they just could not finish. They scored in the last minute to equalise, but it was, again, a bad decision from the referee when it should have been an equaliser for the goal that they didn't pay. that went against them. So this is going to be, again, a really intriguing watch next Monday because Milan don't have a bad record against Napoli and Naples. Before last season, they hadn't won there too often, but they've actually taken points in their last 2 games there. So I think that gives them some, sort of, I guess, a bit of an extra boost. But Milan's away record this season's actually been really good as well this season. So I think this is going to be a cracking contest for that reason in particular. They may have Zlatan Ibrahimovic back. I don't think that's really going to change a lot of things because Olivier Giroud's been in some good form. But I think the one thing that worries me about Milan right now is the over-reliance on Rafael Leao right now. It seems like everything's going through him. They've ditched Alexis Salamakers from the starting 11 and gone to Junior Messias, which I don't agree with. Brahim Diaz, he plays good one game, but he's struggling to back it up right now. I still think he's suffering from long COVID. I don't think he's completely over it.
Okay.
And I think that there's just some concerns in that area. So I think that, look, this week's going to be a real interesting one to see how Milan handle it because in midweek they have a derby in the Cup against Inter. And they said they're going to rotate the squad, but it's a derby after all. It's a 2-legged affair. It won't go to extra time, but still, that's always a physical game.
Coppa Italia semi-final this Wednesday morning, first leg.
And then Monday morning against Napoli. So it's a big week.
It's a tough turnaround.
It is. And look, as well, the good thing is Inter as well have to go through it. They're going to have to back it up. They've been playing games with short turnarounds too with the Champions League. It's catching up with Inter. Like, if it's catching up with anyone, it really is with them.
So I was going to ask, that disappointing performance out of Genoa, what do you put your finger on it?
They look tired. They really look tired.
I was surprised to see Alexis Sanchez starting up top ahead of Martinez or even ahead of Felipe Caicedo, who was a favourite of Simone Inzaghi's and at Lazio.
Yeah, well, the last 4, they haven't scored in their last 3 games in all competitions. They've got some problems up top. And looking at the game against Genoa, it's not as if that they had a bad lineup out there either. This is almost a full strength Inter team, bar Milan Skriniar, bar as well not starting with Eddie. Well, bar's not starting Lautaro Martinez. This is as good as a team as you could possibly have.
Yeah, it's basically
and Skriniar just was on the bench. They just decided to go with D'Ambrosio in this game, and they just completely shut the proverbial.
So, do they have much depth beyond the 11? Is this the problem for Inter that they're going to run into?
Midfield depth has been their problem all season. We saw how well Vidal played in the Champions League, but in the league, his performances this season haven't been great. Up top, I think that I'm not a fan.
Çalhanoğlu and Barella were both substituted in this one. Vecino and Vidal being quite inferior.
Yeah, and Vecino, mate, he spent all of last season literally, exiled from the Inter team. He hasn't played a lot of football. Caicedo, as much as he's a handy striker, he's not necessarily the Inter caliber. He's a good depth striker, but he's not going to win you a game of football. Without Joaquin Correa as well, that's a big loss. Joaquin Correa for me should be starting for Inter alongside Dzeko at the moment. I don't know if Lautaro Martinez is the answer long term. I honestly think they're going to sell him in the off season because I think that there's part of it that maybe, look, they're still in a tough financial position, so they might have to. But, they're still with that Robin Gosens too, but it's not an excuse. I genuinely think this team is tired. And similar to Conte, they're finding struggles in terms of rotating the squad. I think that just the constant games is starting to catch up with them. And Josh, this is not a young team. No. This is one thing we haven't even mentioned. This is an old team. Yeah, they've got a lot of guys over 30. So it's started to catch up, the constant short turnarounds. Early in the season, Serie A, they were playing every 3 days.
It's Dan's army out there. If you look at the likes of Vidal and Sanchez and Perisic and Dzeko even.
They've got to back up.
There's a lot of pressure on players who ain't what they used to be. So it's kind of amazing that they've made it this far and they're still one of the leading title contenders, after 26, 27 games.
But I wouldn't be ruling them out just yet.
Well, they've got a game in hand.
Yes, and I think they'll get bundled out in the Champions League. I don't see them arresting that 2-goal disadvantage at Anfield. I think they're done there. I think that, I wouldn't even be surprised if in that game they kind of go, look, you know what? We might try and go for it in the first half, might try and leave themselves, they'll probably leave themselves a bit open. I still don't see them beating Liverpool. I just don't see them coming back from here. And I think being out of Europe and maybe even out of the Coppa Italia for them, because I think similar to Milan, they'll be prioritising the league in this instance. I don't think that as much as it is a derby, I think for them, they'll want to win the league. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also rotate in that game. So maybe that might work in their favour. If Milan, Inter and Napoli are all out of Europe by the time we get to a couple of weeks' time, this title race is going to really go up a notch because we're going to have 3 teams all focusing on the same prize. Because even though we mentioned the Coppa, the second leg is until the end of April. There is a lot of time in between then for these teams to focus solely on the league. So, you know what, as much as, you don't want to say it's a biscotto, but if Inter wants to sort of throw in the towel in the second leg against Liverpool, you don't really blame them. Because in reality, the team that probably has more to prove in the Champions League is Juventus. They're probably not going to make the grounds in the league right now, despite it's only back to 7 points. But I think for Inter right now, winning the league is more important and it's more realistic.
I want to talk about Spain, Nick.
Yeah,
I think we should.
Before we get to that.
You've got another rant.
But no, it's not a rant. It's just a quick thing that we touched that was dominating.
Okay, victory lap then.
No, it's not even a victory lap. It's just an I told you so.
Is there a big difference?
Okay, all right. I'm going to stop channeling my inner Johnny Warren. But basically, Christian Volpato didn't see a minute this morning against Spezia. I said last week straight up that essentially the second that Roma got players back, it was going to work against Christian Volpato. Henrik Mkhitaryan, Nicolo Zaniolo, Stevan El Shaarawy, Aldo Shmorodov all returned, all saw minutes off the bench against Spezia in their 1-0 win. Now, this is not a knock on Christian Volpato. It's just honesty that we've seen it so many times with young players that when you're a young player in a team that has, at that point in the season, they're contending for Europe, they're going to put their seasoned players out there. And Nicolo Zaniolo and co are seasoned players who have been playing every minute of every game this season. So I worry for Christian Volpato in that sense that minutes are going to be at the premium for the rest of the season. There is going to be opportunities potentially in the Conference League. But again, there are players still ahead of him who probably will get those minutes first. Even Eduardo Bove, who also came on with him in that game, came off the bench ahead of him today too. And that game got decided in the 99th minute. So if they were going to bring on an extra attacking player, you would have thought maybe Volpato would have seen minutes. And despite that performance, it's going to be hard for him. I think back, and this was one example I didn't mention last week on TNC, Josh, but Daniele Maldini scored for Milan against Spezia early in the season. And I think a lot of people probably thought, he's going to kick on, he's going to get minutes. He hasn't started a game in Serie A since then. He's barely seen a minute since then. I think that's just one thing that's just when you're playing for a big club and they've got those ambitions and there are players ahead of you in the pecking order, you can play well, you can score one goal. But if you don't take your opportunities from that moment on, you're not going to get many more minutes. So, again, call the Jets, fellas. We'll see if Christian Volpato can get some minutes before the next round of Internet World Cup qualifiers. If that half an hour was enough to justify selection, I'll be absolutely baffled. But again, I hope we can see more game time for him, but I just don't know if it's going to happen. Just keeping it realistic, guys. This was always going to happen when players were coming back from injuries. So that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, did anyone? And no one should really have been expecting him to start consistently for the rest of the season just because he scored one goal.
No.
But
absolutely
also,
not.
Let's not completely delight in the fact that Australian young players not playing.
No, I'm not delighting in it, Josh. I'm just saying because last week we saw so many takes in regards to, he's scoring goals in Serie A. Again, no, it's a goal. He's played, this amount of time. We need to pick him based off that period of time.
There's every chance, he goes on a Serie B loan next season.
Next season he should. And if he does play well in Serie B, great, select him. Far out, as I said, if he keeps playing and he's playing well, then yes, pick him, but he's not.
Our saviour complex rears its ugly head yet again. Shall we talk about La Liga?
Yes, before we go down into the doldrums of Australian football, we go too far down the rabbit hole. So in La Liga, fun weekend again, a lot of sort of different permutations with the title race. Real Madrid extended their gap to 6 points, 1-0 win over Rayo Vallecano. Karim Benzema, guess who, of course.
Well, they maintained their gap.
Yes, they did maintain their gap. They got the win there. Sevilla kept up the pace, back to 6 points, winning the Seville derby 2-1. Ivan Rakitic and Munir getting on the score sheet. Sergio Canales pulled one back late, but a big win for Sevilla, keeping their sort of gap on top of gap with Madrid just at an arm's length. They're still in it. It's going to be hard. but they're still in with a pulse.
I mean, one of the greatest sights in football is the Seville derby as well.
Yep.
At the Ramon Sanchez Pizjuan.
Yep.
Which is a great stadium, and it's a fierce rivalry. Sevilla, they finally got a result against a big team that they needed, and just the absolute limbs in the crowd afterwards and the roar
fantastic,
is next level. So winning at home against Betis, honestly, it's almost as big as winning the title for them, that game.
Well, there's also one thing to mention on that. That was 2v3 too. So that's a big game. But one thing just about the aesthetic of it, I love a day derby. Like there's something so pure about a day game, and seeing a bit of a change from the always late kickoff and seeing it during the day and that sort of bright feel to it. It's a bit of extra happiness almost.
Sort of Saturday, Sunday at the football in the afternoon. Yeah,
it's wholesome.
It feels traditional, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels a lot more traditional.
And there's certainly a lot of tradition in that match. There's Barcelona beating Athletic Club 4-0, which is a very good result. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang scoring another goal.
Well, Piers Morgan had his say about it, basically saying, oh, look at this. Arteta couldn't get the best out of Aubameyang, and look at him over the last 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, you could also say that maybe Aubameyang wasn't as motivated at Arsenal as he is now. It would be another way to interpret it.
Yeah, because Arteta's done quite a decent job over the past couple of months.
I also think that result was somewhat deceptive, considering Barcelona added 2 goals in the 90th and 93rd minutes from De Jong and Depay, the Dutch duo. So I don't think they were really 4 goals better than Bilbao, but they're certainly improving under Xavi since they brought in those January signings, I think there's a long way to go for this group, but Aubameyang seems on a free to be a decent pickup to keep them in basically the top 4, which is not any guarantee when you see Atletico Madrid's on the same points as they are, albeit with Barcelona having a game in hand, and a very informed Villarreal hot on the
coming
heels
from nowhere, really.
In 6th spot, Unai Emery's Villarreal, I should say. They're only 3 points behind Barcelona in the race for the Champions League, and Real Betis are no guarantees to stay there either on 46 points, but Villarreal's result caught my eye because they thrashed Espanyol 5-1, albeit Espanyol having a terrible season. But 4 goals from 19-year-old Yeremy Pino.
Yes, I mean 4.
And he gave it the big Andre Arshavin as well afterwards, as you would.
Well, he's just been drafted into the Spain national team as well. He's definitely a name to watch over the next few months and seeing how he progresses, because that
Yeremy Jesus Pino Santos. Remember the name.
Definitely.
He looks like quite a player. He's quite small. He's only 5'7", 5'8". But he's very agile and deft, and can dink the ball past players very easily. And I reckon he's a top prospect, and he seems to have a bit of confidence about him as well. Certainly, it's hard not to look confident when you're scoring 4 goals, but he's got a bit of swagger, which you always like to see in a young player. He can play kind of up front as kind of false 9 type. He can play as a number 10 or on the right wing as well. So he's pretty versatile, and we know Luis Enrique likes that in his forward players, and he's also willing to consider players outside of the big 2. Yeah, particularly if they don't play for Real Madrid. He's very keen to pick them.
Well, let's hope he can just bloody give some minutes to Luis Alberto and Fabian Ruiz.
Well, that's the thing.
God, they're the 2 that need some minutes,
but it's sort of a similar complex, I think, to Italy. I mean, they don't tend to pick players who play outside of their own domestic league. So there's a bit of tunnel vision. I guess the Premier League's different because there's some established footballers there who always get picked. But I think they do need to look more at Serie A, and Luis Alberto and Fabian Ruiz having such great seasons. They're overdue a look in. But Yeremy Pino certainly turning heads with his performances. And Unai Emery, I mean, proving that he is a good coach.
Yeah. Well, he
widely mocked for his time at Arsenal. I think a lot of that was based around his appearance and mannerisms, and not entirely based around the football. And Arteta's taken a long time and been given a lot of rope to turn it around. Yeah. And finally, Arsenal are seeing some of the benefits of that. But I think if they'd been more patient with Emery, I don't necessarily think they'd be in much of a different position.
Well, I mean, Emery completely outcoached Allegri in midweek in the Champions League, and that was a great sign of just how much of a how good of a manager he is.
I mean, the meme of him holding up the football with the blackboard in the background goes around a lot. But he is quite literally a deep thinker about football. He's very tactically astute, and maybe Arsenal needed maybe a little bit more personality and leadership from their coach when they've got a young group. He's quite a technocrat, shall we say?
Technocrat. That's a new one. That's a new one.
He's a man about the fine details and perhaps not the most charismatic head coach. And maybe Arteta sort of resonates with that group a little bit more.
The mad scientist.
And I guess outside of Spain, coaching in a second language was tough for him. But I think he was done dirty at the Arsenal, and I like to see his side Villarreal chasing the Champions League. I think it is a demonstration of just how sharp a manager he really is.
Well, before we go, Josh, just some fixtures to keep an eye on for you guys. At home, Coppa Italia this week in midweek. Milan Inter on Wednesday, but Thursday as well is quite a tasty fixture. Fiorentina hosts Juventus. That means Dusan Vlahovic returning to Florence, and we know that there's been quite a few players who have made the move from the Viola to the Bianconeri, and we've seen the reception they've got when they've gone back to Florence. You're going to want to see it because it's going to be freaking hostile, putting it bluntly. That's going to be a really fun games to watch, but hopefully as well we can actually watch the games here in Australia. So if you're out there, you know where we can watch these games, because they used to be on YouTube, Josh, but for some reason this year they've completely taken them off YouTube. They're not on Kayo. It feels like deja vu from the start of the season all over again. Bloody hell. Doing my head in.
Well, but, the Serie A rights were only picked up a day in advance or something.
It was not even a day. It was like
hours?
6 hours before the first game. Or it was like a Saturday night. And Bean just goes, we have the rights. And the game starts at 2 a.m. It's like, you bloody stupid. Anyways, in terms of the rest of the games to look forward to this weekend, some big ones all around the continent. In Spain this weekend, as mentioned, the title race still alive. Real Madrid versus Real Sociedad on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Real Betis against Atleti the next morning at 7 a.m. as well. Elche against Barcelona, and as well Sevilla in action against Deportivo Alaves to kick off the round on Saturday. Serie A, Inter against Salernitana, Milan against Napoli, as mentioned, two of the big games to keep an eye on. And also as well, we've got to give a bit of a love to our friends in Germany, despite that title race all but being done. Bayern Munich versus Bayer Leverkusen on Sunday morning at 1:30 is the pick of the games. But Josh, time for us to say goodbye. We'll be back again next Monday from 6 p.m. here on FNR Football Nation Radio. Make sure you leave us a like, subscribe, give us a review wherever you get any of this, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, if you're still hanging around on SoundCloud these days. But wherever you do so, make sure you subscribe and catch up on all of it and all your other favourite podcasts. We'll be back again tomorrow. Oz Football Hour, Radio Dub. Green Room later this week. Some big guests coming in again.
Yeah, special feature coming up on the Green Room. Look out for that one.
Absolutely. Western United are flying as well, so make sure you keep an eye on that one on Wednesday. So for myself, Nick Tabano, and Josh Parrish, back again next Monday.
Sometimes I feel, I don't know.
Buona giornata, buona serata, buona giornata.
There's not really time to relax and take an espresso for Juventus.